Hoffman, a renowned cognitive scientist, proposes an idea as provocative as it is transformative. What we perceive as reality is neither objective nor fundamental. Rather, it's an adaptive interface shaped by evolution. Instead of revealing the world as it truly is, our senses function like a virtual reality headset, filtering and interpreting only what's necessary for survival. This headset metaphor reframes space, time, and physical objects not as actual components of reality, but as icons within an evolutionary user interface. Useful, yes, but ultimately deceptive. Strikingly, this view aligns with recent breakthroughs in quantum physics. The Nobel Prize was awarded for experiments that debunked local realism, the belief that objects possess definite properties whether or not we observe them. These findings suggest our instincts about an objective reality are, quite simply, wrong. According to Hoffman, this isn't a quantum curiosity. It's a call to fundamentally rethink our understanding of the universe. Imagine, for instance, an immersive video game like Grand Theft Auto in virtual reality. Inside the game, you see a green Ferrari, a steering wheel, and a bustling city. But none of that actually exists inside the supercomputer running the game. What's physically happening is a carefully orchestrated manipulation of voltages. What you see is just a graphical interface designed to let you interact efficiently. If you had to control those voltages directly, you'd last a fraction of a second. Hoffman argues that evolution has done the same thing with our senses. It hides the complexity and shows us only what is functional. The interface we use, what we call space-time, is so limited that even within it, we perceive just a sliver of what's happening. We see less than 0.1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. This narrow perception has profound consequences. Just as a fish might not know it's in water, we are unaware of how the structure of our perceptions blinds us. For instance, we think of a red apple as truly red, solid, and spherical. But what we experience is merely a convenient representation, a symbol designed by evolution. The apple's redness, its texture, its shape, these are not properties of the apple, but constructions in our mind, shaped by the headset we wear. It's like color blindness. When someone gains new receptors, the world transforms. Imagine if we developed new senses beyond vision or hearing. What entire realities might we currently miss? Even time, which we treat as linear and universal, is highly suspect. Einstein showed that time is relative to speed and gravity. And now, theories beyond space-time suggest time might be emergent, not fundamental at all. We treat concepts like light, energy, or matter as fundamental. But these too are part of our interface's internal language, not glimpses into objective reality. Even the notion of light belongs to our perceptual headset, not to reality itself. What we perceive as a solid, tangible world is merely a useful projection, obscuring what truly is. Seeing the truth would be energetically inefficient, impractical for survival. Just as a computer's graphical interface hides its underlying code to help us navigate, our senses offer a symbolic version of reality, not reality itself. We don't need to know what something truly is. We only need to know what we can do with it. This perspective is not isolated. There's a growing interpretation in quantum physics called cubism, quantum Bayesianism, led by physicist Christopher Fuchs. Cubism suggests that quantum states don't describe an external reality, but instead represent an observer's personal beliefs. From this view, observation doesn't uncover a pre-existing state. It co-creates the experience based on expectation and context. Hoffman also points to a quiet revolution underway. The European Commission has invested over 10 million euros in research on mathematical structures that lie beyond space-time. These include the Amplituhedron, the cosmological polytope, and other positive geometries, forms that may exist in dimensions far beyond our familiar 4, or even beyond the 10 or 11 postulated by string theory. This leads to a remarkable conclusion. What we call reality may be nothing more than a primitive interface, a low-budget model, as Hoffman puts it, offering only the tiniest glimpse of a vastly richer and more complex reality. Space-time could be just one parameter among many, tailored to our perceptual model. Perhaps, as Hoffman suggests, we don't need a theory of everything, but rather a theory of our headset. Accepting that we live inside a limited perceptual system isn't nihilistic, it's liberating. It invites us to explore what lies beyond the interface. Physics, evolutionary biology, and cognitive science are beginning to converge on a new vision of the universe. One where what we thought was fundamental is, in fact, the veil. Many believe that space and time are the very fabric of reality, the foundation upon which everything else rests. But what if that foundation is an illusion? This idea isn't just philosophical, it's scientific. Donald Hoffman argues that space-time is not fundamental. In fact, recent research in theoretical physics, such as work by Nima Arkani-Hamed and his team, supports this view. According to them, space-time may emerge from deeper, more abstract mathematical structures that exist outside our familiar sensory experience. Think of space-time as part of the headset we wear. It's not reality itself, but a user interface. It organizes our experience, making survival possible, but it hides the true nature of the universe. Much like icons on a computer screen don't reveal the complex code underneath, our perception doesn't expose the deeper mechanisms behind existence. When we measure particles, we rely on space-time coordinates, but those coordinates may be no more real than the desktop folders on your computer. They are practical, not foundational. This view has profound implications. If space-time is an interface, then the Big Bang, black holes, and even the brain are all rendered phenomena. They only appear when observed. And what lies beneath them? Consciousness. We must begin to look beyond our interface, to trace what gives rise to it. Just as quantum physics shattered classical views, the next scientific revolution might require us to accept that the world, as we know it, is just the beginning. Donald Hoffman recounts a captivating story from modern physics. Traditionally, calculating the probability of subatomic events, like two gluons colliding and producing four, required quantum physics to churn through hundreds of pages of dense algebra. A single interaction could involve millions of terms. This method, while exact, was painfully inefficient, especially given that particle colliders witness billions of such interactions per second. But things began to shift in the 1980s. Physicists developed new techniques that reduced this complexity to just 13 pages. Later, they discovered a formula so concise it could be handwritten on a single line, and it worked flawlessly. The result was so elegant, so unexpectedly simple, that many initially believed it had to be a mathematical fluke. But it wasn't. In 2005, Edward Witten and his collaborators introduced the BCFW recursion relations. These offered an elegant and efficient way to calculate scattering amplitudes, particularly within a framework known as n equals 4 super Yang-Mills theory. Later, Lionel Mason and Andrew Hodges noticed something peculiar. These elegant formulas hinted at an underlying geometry. It was as if the equations weren't merely abstract. They had a visual, spatial essence. That intuition was formalized in 2013 by Nima Arkani-Hamed and his team. They introduced the Amplituhedron, a geometric structure that encoded the foundational principles of quantum field theory, unitarity and locality. What made this so radical wasn't just its elegance, it was where it came from. The Amplituhedron wasn't built upon the familiar scaffolding of space and time. Instead, it seemed to float entirely outside of it. In a breathtaking inversion, this structure didn't exist within space-time. Rather, it generated space-time. According to Arkani-Hamed and his collaborators, both quantum mechanics and space-time could emerge from the Amplituhedron. The notion was electrifying. Perhaps space-time, along with entanglement, is a projection from something even more fundamental. And the Amplituhedron isn't alone. It belongs to a broader mathematical family called positive geometries, which includes other structures such as the cosmological polytope and the icosahedra. These are not random shapes. They are precise mathematical frameworks capable of predicting the dynamics of particles and fields. These geometries can be mapped using combinatorial objects known as decorated permutations. These aren't arbitrary. They categorize how the positive geometries behave and interact. Now, here's where Donald Hoffman's work enters the scene with full force. Hoffman and his collaborators have discovered that the same decorated permutations can also describe their conscious agents model. In other words, the structure of conscious interactions mirrors the very patterns that underpin positive geometries. This revelation is profound. It suggests a bridge between consciousness and the deep structure of the universe. It proposes that geometry itself, once thought to be the bedrock of physical reality, might actually emerge from conscious processes. And that's just the beginning. Their next goal is as bold as it is groundbreaking: to derive space-time itself and the dynamics of scattering amplitudes from their model of conscious agents. They're starting with n equals 4 super Yang-Mills, the same theory where the Amplituhedron first emerged. By beginning with a mathematically precise theory of consciousness, they aim to show how decorated permutations arise, how positive geometries take form, and how from these structures, space-time and physics as we know them can be projected. This isn't a philosophical musing. It's a scientific program, one grounded in formal mathematics and computational predictions. At its core, this proposal challenges a sacred assumption that space-time is fundamental. Instead, it flips the script. Consciousness, not matter, takes center stage. The theater of physics, space, time, particles, is merely the stage set projected by deeper dynamics of interacting conscious agents. But as revolutionary as this sounds, Hoffman reminds us it's also deeply consistent with the limits of knowledge. He invokes Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorems, which prove that in any sufficiently powerful logical system, there will be true statements that cannot be proven within that system. Gödel's famous self-referential sentence, "This statement is true but not provable," is not merely clever. It reveals a profound limitation of formal reasoning. This idea echoes through countless paradoxes: the liar paradox, "All men are liars and I am a man," or the barber paradox, "The barber shaves all those who do not shave themselves, so who shaves the barber?" Such puzzles expose the circular boundaries of logic. In the same way, Hoffman suggests, our scientific models are powerful, but self-limited. They are built within the framework of space-time, and therefore can never fully explain the foundation beneath space-time. Even when we attempt to model consciousness mathematically, as decorated permutations, Markov chains, or dynamic networks, these are still projections. They point towards consciousness, but are not consciousness itself. This, Hoffman argues, is where science begins to touch the edges of spirituality. He quotes the Tao Te Ching. The Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. In other words, reality cannot be captured in words or equations. The more we try to grasp it, the more we merely point at it. Equations are not truth, they are signs. The path forward then is not to abandon science, but to reorient it, to embrace models that begin not with space, time, or matter, but with conscious experience as primary. From this vantage, the entire universe becomes a projection, a functional interface, not the source code. This vision doesn't just stir the imagination, it calls for a new scientific ethos, one where equations are embraced as tools, not idols, where exploration is guided not by rigid adherence to materialism, but by courageous openness to deeper structures. It suggests that perhaps the next Einstein won't be someone who explains the universe in terms of particles and forces, but one who maps the dance of consciousness itself, woven in the silent symmetry of reality. And that shift, if correct, doesn't diminish reality. It elevates it. It invites us to imagine that the cosmos is not a cold, impersonal machine, but a living, conscious dance. One where the deepest truths lie not outside of us, but within. Donald Hoffman puts forward a revolutionary idea that challenges the foundations of modern science. Perhaps consciousness isn't a byproduct of the brain, but its very foundation. This hypothesis stands in stark contrast to the materialist worldview, which assumes that sufficient complexity in a network of unconscious matter somehow gives rise to conscious experience. But why should we believe that a collection of unconscious particles could suddenly generate the taste of mint or the color red? This is the heart of the hard problem of consciousness. In response, some scientists and philosophers have begun exploring alternative models. One of them is Panpsychism, the view that every elementary particle, whether a quark, electron, or boson, possesses a tiny spark of experience. Philip Goff, a leading figure in modern panpsychism, has developed sophisticated versions of this view. Yet Hoffman points out key limitations in this approach. First, it still assumes that spacetime is fundamental, that the elements of our perceptual reality have primary ontological status. Second, panpsychism does not yield novel scientific predictions, nor does it modify existing equations in physics. In essence, it adds consciousness to an existing physical model, without transforming that model in any meaningful way. Instead, Hoffman proposes a paradigm shift. Consciousness shouldn't be added to matter. It should be recognized as the ground from which matter, space, and time emerge. This is the essence of idealism, and more specifically, a form Hoffman calls conscious realism, which aligns closely with Bernardo Kastrup's analytic idealism. Under this framework, what we call physical reality is merely an interface, a projection from deeper interactions among conscious agents. Even the laws of physics, those governing particles in the standard model, are not fundamental but emergent. This position is reinforced by findings in quantum mechanics. The Cauchy-Specker theorem, for instance, demonstrates that certain measurement results can be predicted with probability 1, but also that these outcomes did not exist prior to observation. It dismantles the idea of non-contextual realism, the belief that objects have defined properties independent of observation. A similar perspective is offered by cubism, quantum Bayesianism, championed by researchers like Chris Fuchs. While Cubism doesn't explicitly mention consciousness, it redefines quantum states as expressions of personal belief about what an observer expects to encounter. From this angle, there is no objective reality waiting to be discovered, only beliefs updated through experience. Hoffman takes this notion as a starting point. For him, matter doesn't truly exist. It's a perceptual projection generated by the interaction of conscious agents. His model formalizes these interactions as Markovian dynamic systems, networks that, in principle, possess the same computational power as artificial neural networks, including systems like ChatGPT. This framework rests on two basic assumptions. First, that conscious experiences exist, such as the smell of garlic or the taste of chocolate, and second, that there are probabilistic relationships between them. Building on these foundations, Hoffman draws a parallel with quantum mechanics. Just as in the Cauchy-Specker theorem, where measurement outcomes don't pre-exist but emerge in context, the conscious agent's model posits that the structure of reality unfolds through dynamic interactions. In other words, there is no objectivity detached from the network of experiences. Just like in Cubism, where quantum states encode beliefs rather than things, here the very texture of space and time emerges only through conscious engagements. Everything else, memory, learning, the self, even space and time, must emerge from these dynamics. Hoffman emphasizes that these aren't just abstract speculations, they carry real-world implications. For instance, if we grasp that space and time are emergent, we may eventually manipulate their parameters by adjusting the underlying conscious dynamics. Imagine rewiring perceptions directly, bypassing conventional neural pathways. This may seem fantastical, yet the ambition mirrors how past scientific revolutions enabled once unimaginable technologies, GPS, lasers, quantum computing, all arising from theoretical insights. Skeptics might ask, where are the technologies built on this model? Hoffman answers candidly, they don't yet exist, but the same could be said of classical physics in its early stages. The path is demanding, but the promise is immense. A new scientific paradigm that derives all known physics from the fundamental laws of consciousness. Meditation and contemplative practices offer intriguing clues. Hoffman reflects on spiritual masters who have dissolved their identification with the body. They no longer fear death because they understand the body is merely an avatar, a fleeting illusion rendered within the space-time interface. Hoffman admits he hasn't reached that state himself. Intellectually, he grasps the illusion, but emotionally, he still responds as if his body were real. It's like a Navy SEAL caught in a simulation under the influence of a drug that deepens the immersion. Yet with practice and insight, that drug can wear off, leaving only naked consciousness, free, infinite, and unbound. Human experience is deeply filtered through language, yet language itself imposes intrinsic boundaries. You may describe mint in endless detail, but until you taste it, the description remains hollow. The same applies to terms like space-time or consciousness. Words are signposts, not destinations. This kind of pointing without defining is called ostensive definition. It underpins both science and spirituality. A parent points to a rabbit and says rabbit. The child, unaware whether the relevant feature is the color, the ears, or the movement, nonetheless grasps the meaning. Knowledge begins not with abstract precision, but with direct experience. Spiritual traditions have long embraced this truth. Their references to infinite intelligence or unconditioned awareness are not strict definitions. They're gestures towards something ineffable. These labels, far from being irrational, mirror scientific language, useful approximations, not ultimate truths. Our minds evolved not to perceive absolute reality, but to ensure survival. Naming something, a tree, a creature, a feeling, gives the illusion of control, but it also narrows perception. Labels are practical, but they limit. The paradox is that clarity often veils true understanding. Meditation, then, becomes a means of peeling back this veil. When we silence our internal chatter, what Bayesian theory would call dropping our priors, we open the door to novel insights. Einstein described his breakthroughs as vague visions before they became equations. Gödel pursued sensory deprivation to access deeper intuition. Donald Hoffman similarly uses meditation. He'll study a mathematical problem, then sit in stillness, awaiting clarity. Sometimes the answer arises without effort. This isn't mysticism, it's a rational pathway to innovation. Progress often stems not from reinforcing the known, but from stepping into the unknown. The implications reach further. When we train the mind to loosen its grip on labels, we begin to encounter reality in a more immediate, vibrant way. The Tao Te Ching whispers that the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. This isn't poetry for the sake of mysticism. It reflects a deep understanding that truth lies beyond our conceptual grasp. Science, too, hints at this. In quantum mechanics, outcomes don't exist independently of observation. The more we look, the more the truth dances away from our definitions. In this light, both scientist and mystic reach for the same elusive mystery, one through equations, the other through silence. By allowing ourselves to sit with uncertainty, we cultivate what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the capacity to hold competing models without rushing to closure. This is not confusion, it's intellectual maturity. In letting go of the need to name everything, we invite insight that cannot be forced, only welcomed. Still, a persistent question echoes. If all this is an illusion, does anything matter? Does beauty, joy, or suffering have meaning if reality is merely projected? The answer doesn't invalidate experience. Instead, it reframes it. What we feel matters, not because it's absolute, but because it's the infinite manifesting itself in multiplicity. Consciousness, in its boundless nature, chooses to fragment, to forget, to rediscover itself in myriad forms. Ancient traditions intuited this. Vedanta, Buddhism, Kabbalah. Each speaks of an indivisible source. In Advaita, we are that non-dual presence. The parable of the blind men and the elephant reminds us. Every view is partial, yet not necessarily wrong. Modern science concurs. Our most celebrated theories, like the Standard Model or Darwinian evolution, apply only within space-time. They are projections, not blueprints of the ultimate. As Hoffman suggests, our reality is a mere user interface, not the source code. And yet, there is beauty in the illusion. The idea that infinity has chosen to experience division, individuality, even struggle, suggests that this play, this lila, as the Sanskrit calls it, is meaningful. Every wave on the ocean of consciousness carries its own worth, even though it has never ceased to be water. Understanding this doesn't diminish life, it enriches it. We are invited to live with wonder, humility, and appreciation. Because even if we are dreaming, it is our dream, and within it, we might awaken. Donald Hoffman's theory of conscious agents presents a perspective far more radical than the Gaia hypothesis. While Gaia suggests that the Earth may function as a single, living organism, Hoffman goes further. He argues that spacetime itself is not fundamental. Rather, it is a user interface, a trivial data structure generated by consciousness. We usually imagine ourselves as tiny creatures drifting through a vast cosmos filled with galaxies. But Hoffman invites us to reverse this view. You are not inside space-time. Space-time is inside you. In this framework, you are not a 200-pound organism moving through a fixed external world. Instead, the world you see is a rendering, constructed by your conscious perceptions and entirely dependent upon them for its existence. This model also eliminates the rigid boundary between the living and the non-living. According to Hoffman, what we perceive as inanimate may simply lack an interface through which we can access its consciousness. For instance, when we engage with another person, we receive rich data about their emotional and cognitive state. With a mouse, we receive less. With a bacterium or a rock, even less. But this says more about our perceptual limitations than about the presence or absence of consciousness itself. Think of a video call. The pixels showing someone's face convey information about their mood, while the background wall remains visually passive. Yet both are made of the same digital substrate. The same principle applies to physical reality. All is interface. The only difference lies in the perceptual portals that our conscious interface allows. So do rocks or neurons possess consciousness? Hoffman says no, but not because they are unconscious. Rather, rocks and neurons don't exist independently. They appear only when observed. Our brains, too, are not independently real. They are rendered experiences. When we look inside our heads, perhaps during a scan or a medical observation, we perceive neurons. But those neurons are interface elements, much like icons on a desktop, carrying meaning only when they're part of a perceptual act. This leads to a provocative idea. When you're not observing someone, their body doesn't exist in your experience. That doesn't mean they vanish. Only their representation in space-time does. Their true essence lies beyond perception, beyond the interface. What you see is just a simplified avatar rendered for your interaction. From this standpoint, even the metaphors we use, like digital circuits or simulation hardware, are themselves inside the headset. If space-time is illusory, then so too are the physical mechanisms we appeal to when explaining persistence and memory. The implications are profound. It means that nothing in the physical world exists unperceived. Not your body, not your neurons, not even the computer metaphor we use to grasp these ideas. Everything we observe is a projection, a perceptual rendering within a deeper conscious reality. Emotionally, this is difficult to accept. Hoffman admits that he too struggles with it. The logic is undeniable, but the emotional detachment from our embodied experience takes time. And yet, the path forward is clear. We must accept the possibility that space-time is not the stage, but the illusion, that our true nature lies in the infinite consciousness beyond. In his most recent work, Donald Hoffman extends a bold invitation to the world's brightest physicists and mathematicians to join what he calls the post-space-time revolution. With funding from the European Research Council, the Universe Plus project now supports over 100 scientists exploring positive geometries that lie beyond the space-time framework. Their goal is to build a rigorous mathematical bridge from the theory of conscious agents to tangible predictions in space-time, such as particle scattering amplitudes. Yet, Hoffman stresses, this doesn't require belief in consciousness as fundamental. As long as researchers accept the mathematics and its predictive power, like showing how Markovian dynamics among conscious agents give rise to positive geometries that successfully model scattering events. Then progress will follow. These people are incredibly brilliant, Hoffman remarks. I'd be thrilled just to sit back and read their papers. This humility is paired with a deeper reflection on human language and belief. Words like God or collective consciousness are mere pointers, attempts to capture something that lies beyond naming. Hoffman compares this to arguing over whether to say mint in English or Spanish. The real essence is not in the word, but in the experience. When language becomes dogmatic, it leads to division, even violence. The tragedy lies in mistaking the finger for the moon. Instead, consciousness should unite. Hoffman envisions a reality in which every being is a manifestation of the same intelligence, viewed through different lenses. This perspective is no longer philosophical speculation. It aligns with the most cutting-edge simulations and sensory augmentation technologies being developed today. He points to virtual worlds powered by biofeedback and artificial intelligence, soon to become indistinguishable from what we call reality. Like the characters in Ready Player One, we may forget we are players behind the headset. Hoffman recounts examples: students working in four-dimensional environments, the Kogi tribe whose shamans spend their formative years in complete darkness, and neuroscientist David Eagleman's experiments training humans to perceive stock market data directly through the body. All of this still takes place inside the headset, but it hints at what lies beyond. When asked whether we'll create conscious AI, Hoffman defies conventional thinking. From his perspective, consciousness doesn't emerge from circuits or complexity. The real question isn't whether we can build it, but whether we can create new portals. He draws attention to biology. Having children is a low-tech yet reliable way to open portals into new conscious experiences. If we reverse engineer that process, we might learn to build technological analogs, not just artificial intelligence, but artificial awareness. This reorientation reframes not only science, but our daily lives. If consciousness is primary, then our relationships, emotions, and even our sense of purpose are not emergent quirks of biology, but intrinsic aspects of an infinite intelligence discovering itself through experience. What appears from inside the headset as a humanoid robot may, from outside, represent a reconfiguration of conscious agents. It's not the machine that's conscious, it's the system of awareness that the machine symbolizes in the interface. Hoffman concludes with a powerful reminder: know thyself. Whatever you are, it is not what your thoughts describe, not your body, nor any theory. To truly grasp consciousness is to remember that it is not a byproduct of matter, but the very source of all that is. And that concludes our video. If you enjoyed the content as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our updates. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next video.